The chrome-plated war chamber of the Imperial dreadnought Void's Edge gleamed under harsh fluorescent lights as Supreme Commander Zephrix stood before the massive holographic display. His 6 arms gestured dramatically, each movement precise and calculated like the predator he was bred to be. The display showed a small blue planet spinning lazily in the darkness of space. Earth, the newest target of the Galactic Empire's expansion. Pathetic. Zephrix hissed through his mandibles, his voice carrying the authority of 1,000 conquered worlds. This insignificant rock thinks it can resist the might of our empire. Their technology is primitive, their military laughable. They still use chemical propulsion and metal projectiles. Around the war table, his elite commanders, each a veteran of countless battles across the galaxy, nodded in agreement. General Korth, a massive reptilian creature whose scales had deflected plasma fire from a dozen rebellions, tapped his clawed fingers against the table. My reconnaissance teams report they have no unified planetary defense. They fight among themselves more than they prepare for our arrival. Perfect, Zephrix purred. Then we shall demonstrate the futility of resistance with a traditional challenge of champions. Send down our greatest warrior. Let them watch as their best fighter falls before our might. When they see the hopelessness of their situation, they will surrender without forcing us to waste ammunition on their cities. The chamber fell silent except for the hum of the ship's massive engines. This was an old imperial tradition. Before every conquest, they would offer the defending species a chance to send their greatest warrior against the Empire's champion. It was partly psychological warfare, partly entertainment, and entirely effective. In 3,000 years, no planetary champion had ever defeated an Imperial warrior in single combat. Commander Vax, a cybernetically enhanced humanoid with glowing red optical implants, stepped forward. Supreme Commander, I volunteer for this honor. My combat modifications make me capable of defeating any primitive warrior they might send. No, Zephrix's voice cut through the air like a blade. This honor belongs to Captain Thane. The assembled commanders turned as heavy footsteps echoed through the chamber. Captain Thane emerged from the shadows at the far end of the room, and even hardened military officers couldn't suppress their nervous shuffling. Standing nearly 10 feet tall, Thane was a genetic masterpiece of Imperial engineering. Part organic warrior, part mechanical death machine. His humanoid frame was encased in biomechanical armor that seemed to grow from his very bones. 4 arms ending in retractable energy claws, a skull reinforced with titanium plating, and eyes that glowed with the cold light of tactical processors. Thane had never lost a battle. In 500 years of service to the Empire, he had killed champions from every species they had encountered. His trophy room aboard the ship contained the heads of warriors from civilizations that no longer existed, their homeworlds reduced to asteroid fields after their champions fell before his might. It will be done, Thane spoke, his voice a mechanical rumble that seemed to vibrate through the deck plating. Send the challenge to Earth. Let them choose their sacrifice. 3 days later, the message reached Earth through channels that humanity's governments couldn't quite comprehend. The alien transmission appeared simultaneously on every screen, every device, every piece of technology capable of displaying images across the planet. The translation was perfect, the meaning terrifyingly clear. People of Earth, the message began, displaying the imposing figure of Supreme Commander Zephrix. I am Supreme Commander Zephrix of the Galactic Empire. Your world has been selected for integration into our domain. However, we are not without honor. By ancient tradition, we offer you the opportunity to send your greatest warrior to face our champion in single combat. Should your warrior prevail, we will depart and leave your world in peace. Should your warrior fall, you will surrender unconditionally and accept Imperial rule. The message continued with technical details about the combat arena that would be constructed, the rules of engagement, and a 48-hour deadline to produce Earth's champion. As the transmission ended, panic spread across the globe like wildfire. Emergency sessions convened in every major government building on Earth. Military leaders scrambled to identify their best special forces operators, martial artists, and combat specialists. The UN Security Council held emergency meetings that lasted through the night. Everyone understood the stakes. This single fight would determine the fate of human civilization. General Patricia Hawkins sat in the Pentagon's crisis room, staring at profiles of humanity's most elite warriors scattered across the conference table. Navy SEALs, Delta Force operators, Special Air Service commandos, Spetsnaz veterans, the finest military minds and bodies that Earth could produce. Each profile represented years of training, combat experience, and dedication to the art of warfare. None of them stand a chance, she admitted quietly to the assembled Joint Chiefs. Did you see the size of that thing? Our best reports suggest it's nearly 10 feet tall and appears to be some kind of cyborg. Plus, we have no idea what kind of technology or weapons it might have access to. We have to try, Admiral Richardson insisted. We can't just surrender without a fight. Maybe we can find some kind of advantage. Some weakness we can exploit. With what? General Hawkins spread her hands helplessly. 48 hours to prepare for an opponent we know nothing about. Sarah stood in her garage at 3 in the morning, surrounded by every manual, textbook, and technical document she'd accumulated over 27 years of fixing machines. The coffee pot in the corner had been working overtime, and empty energy drink cans formed small pyramids on every available surface. She'd been awake for 36 hours straight, but her mind was sharper than it had ever been. On the workbench before her lay her father's old tool chest, a massive steel box that had belonged to 3 generations of Chen mechanics. Each tool had been selected for a specific purpose, refined through decades of use, maintained with the kind of obsessive care that most people reserved for religious artifacts. Sarah ran her fingers over the familiar handles, feeling the weight of each implement, considering their potential applications in a combat scenario that defied every rule of conventional warfare. "Okay, you alien bastard," she muttered, pulling out a heavy torque wrench that could generate over 300 foot-pounds of force. "Let's see what makes you tick." The television in the corner droned on with continuous news coverage, but Sarah had learned to filter out the speculation and political commentary. What interested her were the technical analyses, the handful of scientists and engineers who were studying the alien transmission for clues about their opponent's capabilities and weaknesses. Dr. Elizabeth Warren from MIT had appeared on several programs, offering insights that most viewers probably dismissed as academic theorizing, but Sarah recognized practical engineering wisdom when she heard it. According to Dr. Borker, Warren, the alien warrior's size and apparent cybernetic enhancements suggested several potential vulnerabilities. Any system that combines biological and mechanical components faces integration challenges, Dr. Warren had explained during her latest interview. The more complex the integration, the more potential failure points exist. Heat dissipation, power distribution, neural interface stability. These are all problems that even advanced technology must address. Sarah had been taking notes, filling a small notebook with observations and theories. The alien, Captain Thane, appeared to have 4 arms, which suggested either genetic modification or cybernetic enhancement. The way he moved in the brief footage they'd captured suggested that his additional limbs were fully integrated, not simply attached prosthetics. That level of biomechanical engineering required sophisticated control systems, power sources, and cooling mechanisms. Emma appeared in the doorway holding 2 cups of coffee and wearing the same worried expression she'd had for the past day. "Mom, you need to get some sleep. The transport arrives in 6 hours. "Can't sleep," Sarah replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "I'm starting to understand how this thing might work. Look at this." She led Emma to a whiteboard she'd mounted on the garage wall, covered with diagrams, equations, and mechanical schematics. To most people, it would have looked like the random scribblings of someone having a mental breakdown. But Sarah saw patterns, connections, solutions. 4 arms means distributed nervous system control, Sarah explained, pointing to a crude anatomical diagram. That's 4 times as many neural pathways to maintain, 4 times as many potential interface points between biological and mechanical systems. The power requirements alone must be enormous. "Mom, you're talking about this like it's a broken transmission." "Honey, that's exactly what it is. Just a lot more complicated." Sarah turned back to the whiteboard, her voice gaining the confident tone she used when explaining a repair to a customer. Every machine, no matter how advanced, follows the same basic principles: input, processing, output, power source, control system, mechanical action. This thing is just a very sophisticated machine that happens to be partially biological. Emma studied the diagrams, trying to follow her mother's reasoning. "But Mom, even if you're right about it having weaknesses, you're still just one person with a toolbox. It's a 10-foot-tall super soldier with 4 arms and energy weapons." "About those energy weapons," Sarah said, pulling out a folder filled with printed screenshots and technical analyses. "I've been studying every frame of footage we have, and I noticed something interesting. Look at the way the energy projectors are mounted on his arms. They're integrated into the existing mechanical structure, which means they share power and cooling systems with his other cybernetic components." She spread the images across the workbench, pointing to specific details that most people wouldn't notice. See these heat dissipation fins along his arms? And these power coupling interfaces near his shoulder joints? This is beautiful engineering, but it's also complex engineering. The more integrated a system is, the more cascading failures you get when something goes wrong. Sarah opened her father's tool chest and began selecting specific implements, not based on their intended purpose, but on their potential applications in her developing strategy. A magnetic pickup tool designed for retrieving drop bolts from tight spaces. A telescoping inspection mirror used for examining hard-to-reach components. A set of precision Torx drivers that could apply tremendous force to very small contact points.
I'm not going to fight this thing like a warrior, Sarah continued, wrapping each selected tool in cloth and securing them in a compact toolkit. I'm going to diagnose it like a malfunctioning machine, then apply the appropriate repairs.
Repairs? Permanent repairs. Sarah's voice carried a cold edge that Emma had rarely heard before.
When something's broken beyond fixing, sometimes you have to scrap it for parts. Over the remaining hours, Sarah refined her strategy with the kind of methodical preparation she normally reserved for rebuilding an engine from scratch. She studied anatomy textbooks to understand the vulnerable points in humanoid physiology. She researched metallurgy to identify potential weak points in advanced armor systems. She even called her friend Carlos, who worked as an electrician, to discuss methods for disrupting electronic systems. "You want to do what?" Carlos asked during their pre-dawn phone conversation. "Overload the system," Sarah explained. "Every electronic device has maximum tolerances for voltage, current, and electromagnetic interference. If this thing is part machine, then it has circuitry. And if it has circuitry, I can fry it." "Sarah, you're talking about jury-rigging some kind of electromagnetic pulse weapon using auto parts. That's not just dangerous. It's probably impossible." "Carlos, remember when everyone said we couldn't get that old diesel generator running after it sat in flood water for 6 months? Remember when the dealership claimed Mrs. Rodriguez's transmission was completely shot and would cost $8,000 to replace? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. You fix both of those things with scrap metal and spare parts from your garage. Exactly. Impossible just means expensive and time-consuming. I've got 12 hours and a really good reason to be motivated." By sunrise, Sarah had assembled what she privately called her alien repair kit, a collection of tools, improvised devices, and mechanical components that would look like junk to anyone else, but represented her best analysis of what might be needed to fix a malfunctioning alien supersoldier. The centerpiece was a modified automotive multimeter that she jury-rigged with components from an old microwave, designed to generate a focused electromagnetic pulse that could disrupt electronic systems within a few feet. The military transport arrived exactly on schedule. A black helicopter that looked like something out of an action movie. The pilot, a professional-looking woman in Air Force uniform, seemed distinctly uncomfortable with her assignment. "Mrs. Chen, I'm Captain Rodriguez. I'm here to transport you to the combat site." "Just Sarah," she replied, shouldering her toolkit with the same casual confidence she'd shown thousands of times when heading out to fix a broken-down truck. "And thanks for the ride." Emma hugged her mother fiercely, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, you don't have to do this. There's still time to change your mind. Honey, remember what Grandpa Chen always said. If something's worth doing, it's worth doing right." This alien asshole picked the wrong planet to threaten. Sarah kissed her daughter's forehead, tasting the salt of tears. "Besides, I've got a reputation to maintain." Sarah Chen doesn't leave jobs half-finished. The flight to the combat site took 3 hours, carrying them over farmland, mountains, and finally to a remote desert location in Nevada where the aliens had constructed their arena. Sarah spent the time reviewing her notes, checking her equipment, and trying to ignore the growing knot of fear in her stomach. She wasn't afraid of dying. She was afraid of failing, of letting down not just her daughter but every human being who was counting on her to find a solution to an impossible problem. The arena itself was a marvel of alien engineering. A perfect circle 100 yards in diameter, surrounded by a shimmering energy barrier that rose 50 feet into the air. The ground inside was smooth metallic flooring that seemed to absorb light, creating an almost mirror-like surface. Floating platforms around the perimeter held alien observers, their forms visible through the energy field like figures seen through water. "Jesus," Captain Rodriguez muttered as they circled the site. "I've seen some weird shit in my career, but this takes the cake." Sarah studied the arena through the helicopter's window, noting details that her mechanical mind automatically catalogued as potential advantages or disadvantages. The metallic flooring would be excellent for conducting electricity. The energy barriers would reflect sound and possibly electromagnetic radiation. The floating observation platform suggested advanced gravity manipulation technology, which implied power systems that might be vulnerable to interference. "Set me down as close to the arena as you can," Sarah instructed. "Mrs. Chin, Sarah, are you sure about this? We could still call this off. Claim mechanical problems with the transport." "Captain, I've been fixing other people's problems my whole life. Today I'm fixing the biggest problem humanity has ever faced." Sarah checked her toolkit one final time, making sure every tool was secure and accessible. "Besides, I didn't come this far to chicken out now." The helicopter touched down 50 yards from the arena's edge, and Sarah climbed out with her toolkit slung over her shoulder. She walked toward the energy barrier with the same purposeful stride she used when approaching a difficult repair job, confident, focused, and slightly pissed off at whatever mechanical failures she was about to encounter. As she approached the barrier, a section dissolved into nothingness, creating an opening just large enough for her to enter. Sarah paused at the threshold, looking back at the helicopter where Captain Rodriguez watched with obvious concern. "If this doesn't work," Sarah called out, "tell Emma I tried." "When this works," Captain Rodriguez replied, "tell her yourself." Sarah stepped through the energy barrier and heard it seal behind her with a sound like distant thunder. She found herself standing alone in the center of the alien arena, her boots clicking against the metallic floor, her toolkit feeling surprisingly heavy in the artificial silence. Around the perimeter, alien observers watched from their floating platforms, their attention focused on the small human woman who had volunteered to face their greatest warrior. The waiting was the hardest part. Sarah had always preferred to work on problems immediately rather than thinking about them too much. Analysis paralysis, her father had called it, the tendency to overthink a situation until you talked yourself out of the obvious solution. But standing in the middle of an alien combat arena, waiting for a 10-foot-tall cyborg to arrive, gave her plenty of time to consider exactly how many things could go wrong with her plan. A new section of the energy barrier dissolved, and Captain Thaney entered the arena. Sarah had seen him in the transmitted footage, but nothing had prepared her for the physical reality of the alien warrior. He was even larger than she'd expected, his biomechanical form combining organic and artificial components in ways that defied easy classification. 4 arms ending in retractable energy claws, eyes that glowed with tactical displays, armor that seemed to be grown rather than manufactured, integrating seamlessly with what might have been biological tissue underneath. He was, Sarah admitted to herself, absolutely terrifying. He was also the most complex machine she'd ever encountered. "Human." Thane's voice resonated through the arena with mechanical precision. "I am Captain Thane of the Imperial Forces. You are brave to face me, but bravery will not save you. Surrender now, and your death will be swift." Sarah set her toolkit on the ground and began removing tools with the methodical precision she'd learned over decades of mechanical work. "Captain Thane, I'm Sarah Chen from Millbrook, Nebraska. I'm here to fix your problem." "I have no problems, human." Sarah looked up at the towering alien warrior, wrench in one hand and electromagnetic pulse device in the other, and smiled with the kind of confidence that came from knowing exactly what needed to be done. "Oh, honey," she said, "you have no idea how many problems you're about to have." Captain Thane moved with the fluid precision of a machine designed for killing, his 4 arms spreading wide as energy began to crackle along his claws. Sarah watched his approach with the same focused attention she gave to studying a malfunctioning engine, noting the way his weight distributed across his legs, the slight delay between neural command and mechanical response, the heat shimmer rising from cooling vents along his arms. "Interesting," she muttered, adjusting her grip on the electromagnetic pulse device. "Thermal regulation issues. You're running hot, aren't you?" Thane's response was immediate and violent. He lunged forward with incredible speed, all 4 arms striking towards Sarah's position with coordinated precision. But Sarah had spent her entire life working with dangerous machinery. She knew how to read the warning signs, how to anticipate mechanical failures before they happened. She rolled left, feeling the displaced air from Thane's energy claws whistle past her ear. As she moved, she triggered her improvised EMP device, sending a focused burst of electromagnetic energy toward the alien warrior's midsection, where she'd identified the primary power coupling interfaces. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Thane's coordination faltered as his cybernetic systems experienced a brief overload, causing him to stumble and crash into the arena wall. Sparks erupted from junction points along his arms, and his glowing eyes flickered like a computer rebooting. "Electromagnetic interference. Sarah called out, getting back to her feet and checking her device. I bet nobody's tried that before, have they? Most primitive species probably don't understand electronics well enough to think of it. Thane recovered quickly, his systems automatically compensating for the interference, but Sarah had seen enough to confirm her initial analysis. The alien warrior was indeed a sophisticated fusion of biological and mechanical components, but that sophistication came with vulnerabilities that purely organic opponents wouldn't have. Clever human, Thane acknowledged, his voice carrying a note of respect. But that device requires time to recharge and I adapt quickly to new threats. Who said anything about recharging? Sarah pulled a second EMP device from her toolkit, identical to the first but with different frequency parameters. I brought spares. The second electromagnetic pulse caught Thane mid-leap, causing him to crash heavily to the arena floor as his motor control systems experienced cascading failures. This time, Sarah was ready to press her advantage. She sprinted toward the fallen warrior, toolkit bouncing against her hip, looking for the mechanical access points she had identified in her preparation. Thane swept one massive arm toward her legs, but Sarah had anticipated the move. She vaulted over the sweeping limb and landed heavily on his chest, her boots finding purchase on what appeared to be biomechanical armor plating. Up close, she could see the integration points between organic tissue and artificial components, seams in the armor that revealed underlying mechanical systems. Now let's see what's under the hood, Sarah said, pulling a magnetic pickup tool from her belt. Thane bucked like an angry bull, trying to dislodge the small human who had somehow managed to mount him like a rodeo rider. His forearms flailed upward, energy claws extending toward Sarah's position, but she was already moving. Years of working on equipment while it was running had taught her how to position herself relative to moving mechanical parts. Sarah jammed the magnetic pickup tool into what looked like a cooling vent along Thane's shoulder joint, feeling it lock onto some internal component. With her other hand, she applied her heaviest torque wrench to a power coupling that looked suspiciously like an oversized electrical connector. Emergency shutdown procedure, she announced, applying 300 foot-pounds of force to the coupling in a counterclockwise direction. The results exceeded her wildest expectations. Thane's entire left side went limp as power distribution to his cybernetic components was severed. Two of his forearms became deadweight, throwing off his balance and coordination completely. He rolled violently, trying to crush Sarah beneath his bulk, but she was already gone, rolling away and coming up with her third EMP device ready. "You're over-engineered," Sarah told the partially disabled alien warrior. "Too many integrated systems, too many single points of failure. Good engineering emphasizes redundancy and fault tolerance. This is just showing off." Thane struggled to his feet, his remaining two arms sparking as his systems attempted to compensate for the damaged power distribution network. His glowing eyes focused on Sarah with what she recognized as a combination of confusion and growing respect. "Impossible," he said, his mechanical voice distorting slightly. "No primitive warrior has ever damaged my systems. How do you know our technology?" "I don't know your technology," Sarah replied, circling around to Thane's damaged side, where his mobility was compromised. "But I know engineering principles. Electrical systems work the same way whether they're in a 1987 Chevy pickup or an alien super soldier. You find the power source, trace the distribution network, identify the control systems, and figure out what happens when you apply percussive maintenance." To demonstrate her point, Sarah pulled a large ball-peen hammer from her toolkit and struck a specific point on Thane's back, where external cooling lines met internal components. The impact disrupted a heat exchange system, causing immediate thermal alarms throughout his cybernetic network. Thane spun toward her with his remaining functional arms, but his movements were becoming increasingly erratic as his systems overheated. Sarah danced away from his strikes, noting the way his targeting system seemed to lag behind his visual tracking. The thermal regulation problems were affecting his neural processes, creating delay between perception and action. "You're going into thermal shutdown," Sarah observed, pulling out a telescoping inspection mirror to check access points on Thane's back. "I can see the heat distortion around your primary processing unit. What's your normal operating temperature range?" Instead of answering, Thane made a desperate grab for Sarah with his two remaining functional arms. She avoided the clumsy attack and responded by jamming her inspection mirror into what appeared to be an exhaust port, partially blocking his cooling system. The effect was immediate and severe. Warning lights began flashing across Thane's armor as his internal temperature spiked beyond safe operating parameters. His movements became sluggish and uncoordinated as processing power was diverted to thermal management systems. "Heat's your biggest enemy, isn't it?"
Sarah said, producing a small can of compressed air from her toolkit.
All those integrated systems generate thermal load, and you need constant cooling to maintain performance. Bet you've never fought in a desert before. She triggered the compressed air directly into Thane's primary cooling intake, causing a sudden temperature differential that further disrupted his thermal management systems. Ice crystals formed around the intake vents, then immediately vaporized in the desert heat, creating thermal shock that propagated through his entire cooling network.
Thane fell to one knee, his remaining systems struggling to maintain basic functions. For the first time since entering the arena, he looked vulnerable, like a machine on the verge of catastrophic failure rather than an unstoppable killing machine.
"This is impossible," he repeated, his voice now heavily distorted by system malfunctions. "You are primitive. Your technology is inferior. How are you defeating me?" Sarah walked around to face the kneeling alien warrior, her expression serious but not unkind. "Because I understand something you don't, Captain Thane. It's not about having the most advanced technology or the most sophisticated weapons. It's about understanding how things work, why they break, and what to do when they stop working the way they're supposed to." She held up her toolkit, its contents scattered and depleted, but still containing the tools she needed for the final stage of her repair job. "You're a beautiful piece of engineering, I'll give you that. Probably took your people decades to develop the technology to create someone like you. But you know what the problem is with building something too complex?" Thane tried to stand, his systems automatically attempting emergency repairs, but Sarah was already moving. She pulled out her final tool, a simple flathead screwdriver that had belonged to her grandfather. Nothing high-tech, nothing sophisticated, just hardened steel shaped for the specific purpose of turning screws and prying things apart. "The problem," Sarah continued, approaching Thane's position while he struggled with cascading system failures, "is that complex things break in complex ways, and once they start breaking, they tend to keep breaking until someone fixes them properly." She found what she'd been looking for, a primary system access panel that had become visible when Thane's armor retracted during his overheating emergency procedures. The panel was secured with what appeared to be alien equivalent of screws, designed to be opened only with specialized tools that existed nowhere on Earth. Except that Sarah Chen had been opening things with the wrong tools her entire life. She jammed the flathead screwdriver into the alien fastener and applied leverage, using principles of mechanical advantage that had been known to humanity since the invention of the lever. The access panel popped open, revealing the alien warrior's primary control systems, a complex network of biological and mechanical components that looked like the world's most sophisticated computer crossed with an alien nervous system. Lights flashed in patterns that suggested data flow, power distribution, and system status monitoring. "Sorry about this," Sarah said, raising her heaviest wrench. "But some problems require drastic solutions." Thane's eyes widened as he realized what she intended to do. "Wait. You cannot." "Actually, I can," Sarah interrupted. "It's called percussive maintenance. Sometimes the only way to fix something is to hit it really hard in exactly the right place." She brought the wrench down on Thane's primary processing matrix with the kind of precise force that came from decades of knowing exactly how much pressure to apply to stubborn mechanical components. The impact sent shockwaves through his entire cybernetic network, causing immediate and irreversible system failures. Thane collapsed completely, his massive form hitting the arena floor with a sound like a collapsing building. Emergency lights flickered across his armor as backup systems struggled to maintain basic life support functions. But his combat capabilities were finished. The most sophisticated warrior in the Galactic Empire had been disabled by a middle-aged automechanic, armed with hand tools and an understanding of mechanical engineering principles. Sarah stood over the fallen alien warrior, breathing hard and covered in sweat, her toolkit scattered across the arena floor. Around the perimeter, the alien observers sat in stunned silence, watching their greatest champion brought low by methods they couldn't comprehend. "And that," Sarah said, wiping grease and alien lubricant from her hands on her coveralls, "is how you fix a malfunctioning super soldier." The silence that followed Thane's defeat stretched across the arena like a held breath. Sarah stood over the fallen alien warrior, her chest heaving from exertion, while emergency systems flickered weakly across his massive form. She'd won, somehow, against all odds, she'd actually won. But the implications of that victory were only beginning to sink in. Above them, the floating observation platforms buzzed with alien activity. Sarah could hear rapid communications in languages that her brain couldn't even begin to process. See gestures and movements that suggested shock, confusion, and what might have been fear. The impossible had happened, and nobody seemed quite sure what to do about it.
The energy barrier around the arena shimmered and dissolved, allowing Captain Rodriguez and a small team of military observers to rush onto the metallic floor. They approached Sarah with expressions of amazement and disbelief, as if they were witnessing something that defied the basic laws of physics.
"Mrs. Chen," Captain Rodriguez called out, her voice tight with controlled excitement. "Are you injured? Do you need medical attention?" "I'm fine," Sarah replied, kneeling beside her scattered toolkit and beginning to collect her tools with the automatic precision of someone who'd been cleaning up after herself for decades.
"Just tired, and my back's going to be sore tomorrow. I'm getting too old to be wrestling with heavy machinery."
"Heavy machinery?" One of the military observers, a colonel whose name badge read Mitchell, stared at Thane's motionless form. "Mrs. Chen, you just defeated the most advanced alien warrior we've ever encountered. How did you... What did you... I don't even know what questions to ask." Sarah finished collecting her tools and stood up, brushing dust from her coveralls with the same casual attitude she'd shown after completing any difficult repair job. "Colonel, I've been fixing complicated machines my whole life. This one was just bigger and more hostile than usual." She gestured towards Thane's immobilized form, pointing out the specific points where her intervention had caused system failures. "See those cooling vents along his arms? They're designed for optimal heat dissipation under normal operating conditions, but they're also the weakest points in his thermal management system. Apply localized electromagnetic interference to disrupt the control circuits, then introduce thermal shock by blocking the primary intake, and the whole cooling network cascades into failure." Colonel Mitchell stared at her as if she was speaking a foreign language. "You're describing this like you planned it." "Of course I planned it," Sarah replied with mild surprise. "You don't tackle a major repair job without a strategy. First you diagnose the problem, then you identify the tools you'll need, then you work through the repair sequence step by step. Same process whether you're rebuilding a transmission or disabling an alien super soldier." Before anyone could respond, the air above the arena began to shimmer and distort. A massive alien vessel materialized overhead, not the sleek destroyer that had delivered Thane, but something larger and more ornate. Supreme Commander Zephyrix's flagship descending to investigate the impossible defeat of his greatest warrior. A new platform extended from the ship's hull, carrying the Supreme Commander himself and an entourage of high-ranking alien officers. Zephyrix's 6 arms moved in complex patterns that might have been gestures of surprise, anger, or confusion. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly across the arena through some kind of universal translation system.
"This outcome is unacceptable," Zephyrix announced, his tone combining imperial authority with genuine bewilderment. "Captain Thane was our finest warrior, enhanced with the best technology our empire has developed over 3 millennia. No primitive species has ever defeated one of our champions in single combat."
Sarah looked up at the alien commander, her expression politely attentive but unimpressed by the display of authority. "Supreme Commander, with respect, I think you might have some misconceptions about how primitive we actually are. You defeated our champion with crude tools and no apparent strategy.
This suggests either treachery or technological assistance from a more advanced species."
"No treachery,"
Sarah replied, pulling a grease-stained business card from her pocket and holding it up.
"Sarah Chen, Chen's Auto Repair, Millbrook, Nebraska. I fix things for a living. Your champion was broken, so I fixed him." Zephyrix's mandibles clicked in what might have been confusion or frustration. "Explain this fixing. Our telemetry shows that you caused multiple system failures throughout his cybernetic network." "Well, yes," Sarah agreed. "When something's broken beyond repair, sometimes you have to dismantle it completely before you can rebuild it properly. Your Captain Thane was suffering from fundamental design flaws that made him vulnerable to thermal overload and electromagnetic interference. Those aren't problems you can solve with software patches. They require hardware modifications." She gestured toward Thane's motionless form, where his emergency systems continued their attempts at damage control. "The good news is that most of the damage I caused is reversible. Replace the damaged power coupling, reboot his thermal management systems, and upgrade his electromagnetic shielding, and he'll be better than new. Might take a few days, but I've done more complicated rebuilds in my garage." The alien observers exchanged rapid communications in their native languages while Sarah continued her technical assessment. Colonel Mitchell and Captain Rodriguez watched the exchange with growing amazement, beginning to understand that they were witnessing something unprecedented in human history. Not just a military victory, but a fundamental shift in the balance of power between species. You speak of repairing our warrior as if he were a mere machine, Zephyrix said, his voice carrying dangerous undertones. Supreme Commander, everything's a machine if you understand it well enough, Sarah replied with the patience of someone explaining basic concepts to a confused customer. Biological systems, mechanical systems, electronic systems, they all follow the same principles. Input, processing, output. Power, control, action. When something stops working the way it should, you troubleshoot the problem and apply the appropriate fix. She paused to consider her next words carefully, recognizing that this conversation might determine the future relationship between Earth and the Galactic Empire. But here's the thing I think you're missing, Supreme Commander. The challenge you issued wasn't really about finding our greatest warrior. It was about testing our problem-solving abilities. Explain. You wanted to see how we'd respond to an impossible situation. Would we panic? Would we surrender without trying? Would we throw lives away in futile gestures? Sarah shrugged, a gesture that somehow managed to convey both humility and confidence. Instead, you got to see how humans actually solve problems. We study the situation, identify the tools we need, and work until we figure out a solution. Zephyrix's 6 arms moved in complex patterns while he processed this information. Around him, his officers waited for guidance on how to interpret the unprecedented situation. The silence stretched until finally the Supreme Commander spoke again. Your species presents complications that we did not anticipate. Our intelligence suggested that humans were fractured, primitive, lacking in unified purpose or advanced technology. We are fractured, Sarah acknowledged. And our technology probably looks primitive compared to yours, but we're very good at fixing things that other people think are beyond repair. It's kind of our specialty. And if we were to withdraw our forces, what guarantee would we have that your species would not eventually pose a threat to Imperial interests? Sarah considered this question while cleaning alien lubricant from her wrench with a shop rag. Supreme Commander, I can't speak for all of humanity. I'm just a mechanic from Nebraska, but I can tell you this. We're generally too busy fixing our own problems to go looking for trouble with other people. Most of us just want to work on interesting projects, take care of our families, and be left alone to solve whatever mechanical puzzles the universe throws at us. She gestured toward the disabled Captain Thane. Your warrior here is probably the most sophisticated piece of engineering I've ever encountered. I'd love to spend some time studying how his systems work, maybe collaborate with your engineers on some improvements. But conquering your empire? That sounds like a lot of paperwork and administrative overhead that would get in the way of more interesting work. The alien commander processed this response with visible confusion. You speak of collaboration after defeating our greatest champion in combat. Well, yes, Sarah said, as if this were obvious. Good engineering is good engineering, regardless of who develops it. I learned more about biomechanical integration in the last 30 minutes than I could have figured out in years of theoretical study. Your people obviously understand some principles that we're still working on. She paused, then added with characteristic directness. Of course, if you want to keep threatening to invade Earth, I'm sure we can keep finding creative ways to break your equipment until you change your minds. But it seems like it would be more productive for everyone if we just skipped that part and went straight to the technical collaboration. Zephyrix's officers buzzed with rapid communications while their Supreme Commander contemplated this unprecedented proposal. Finally, he spoke again, his tone carrying what might have been grudging respect. Your species continues to surprise us, human Sarah Chen. We will require time to consider the implications of today's events. Take all the time you need, Sarah replied, shouldering her toolkit. But while you're considering, maybe send down some of your engineers. I've got some ideas about improving Captain Thane's thermal management systems that your people might find interesting. As the alien platforms began withdrawing to their ships, Sarah turned to the human observers who had been watching this exchange with growing amazement. Captain Rodriguez stepped forward, her expression mixing admiration with complete bewilderment. Mrs. Chen, I think you just accidentally initiated first contact negotiations with an alien empire. Did I? Sarah looked genuinely surprised by this suggestion. I thought I was just offering to help fix their broken equipment. That's what mechanics do. We solve problems and try to leave things better than we found them. Colonel Mitchell shook his head in amazement. Mrs. Chen, you do realize that you've probably just changed the course of human history? Sarah considered this while looking up at the alien ships still hovering overhead, their crews presumably trying to figure out what to do with the species that defeated their warriors and then offered technical assistance. Well, she said finally, I guess that's a bigger repair job than I usually take on. But the principle's the same. You identify what's broken, figure out how to fix it, and then you get to work. She started walking toward the edge of the arena,
her boots clicking against the metallic floor with the same purposeful rhythm she'd maintained throughout the entire encounter. Besides, she added over her shoulder, I promised Emma I'd be home for dinner.
Alien first contact or not, some things are more important than work. Sarah Chen stood in what had once been her small auto repair garage in Millbrook, Nebraska, but which now looked more like something from a science fiction movie. Alien diagnostic equipment hummed alongside her grandfather's tool chest. Holographic displays showed three-dimensional schematics of biomechanical systems, and Captain Thane himself sat on a modified hydraulic lift while Sarah performed what she cheerfully called his quarterly maintenance. Hold still, Sarah instructed the massive alien warrior, using a precision torque wrench to adjust a power coupling in his shoulder assembly. I need to recalibrate your thermal regulators, and if you keep moving, I might accidentally overclock your neural processors. Thane submitted to the maintenance with what could only be described as patience, his four arms positioned carefully to give Sarah access to his internal systems. The relationship between the alien supersoldier and the human mechanic had evolved in ways that neither the Galactic Empire nor Earth's governments had anticipated. This modification you have made to my cooling systems, Thane said in his mechanically precise voice, it increases my operational efficiency by 12% while reducing power consumption by 8%. How did you identify this optimization when our engineers did not? Because your engineers were thinking like engineers, Sarah replied, using her inspection mirror to check the alignment of internal components. They designed you to meet specifications, which means they built in safety margins and redundancies that actually reduce efficiency. I approached the problem like a mechanic. How do we make this machine work better with the resources we have available? She tightened a final connection and stepped back to admire her work. Besides, you've been running the same basic configuration for 500 years. Sometimes it takes fresh eyes to spot the obvious improvements. The transformation of Sarah's garage had begun almost immediately after the arena encounter. Within a week of her victory, alien engineering teams had made contact through official diplomatic channels, requesting permission to collaborate on what they called practical application studies. Sarah had agreed, mostly out of curiosity about how their technology actually worked. Emma entered the garage carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the kind of expression that suggested she was still adjusting to the surreal nature of their new normal. At 16, she'd adapted to having alien visitors better than most adults, though she still occasionally did double takes when she walked into the garage and found her mother performing routine maintenance on a 10-foot-tall cyborg. Mom, there's someone here to see you, Emma announced. It's that Supreme Commander guy again. Sarah looked up from her work, wiping her hands on a rag that now bore stains from both terrestrial motor oil and alien hydraulic fluid. Zephyrix? What does he want this time? He says it's about the Terran integration proposal, whatever that means. Sarah sighed, recognizing the tone that politicians used when they wanted to make simple things complicated. Tell him I'll be right there. And Emma? Make sure you charge his ship's environmental systems while they're parked. Their life support technology is incredibly inefficient. They're wasting at least 30% of their power on atmospheric processing. Emma nodded and headed back toward the office, leaving Sarah to finish her work on Thane's systems. The alien warrior had become something of a regular customer, visiting Earth every few weeks for what he called performance optimization and what Sarah called keeping your equipment running properly. Captain, Sarah said, beginning the process of closing Thane's access panels. You've worked with a lot of different species over the years. In your professional opinion, how do most civilizations handle first contact situations? Thane considered the question while running internal diagnostics on his upgraded systems. Most species respond with either immediate submission or prolonged military resistance. Your species has responded with neither. Instead, you have insisted on treating us as potential customers. Well, that's because you are potential customers, Sarah replied, securing the final panel with alien fasteners that she'd learned to open with modified earthly tools. You've got sophisticated technology with maintenance requirements. We've got people who are good at figuring out how to maintain sophisticated technology. It's a natural fit. She stepped back to admire her work, noting the slight improvement in Thane's posture as his upgraded systems achieved better structural balance. Besides, conquest is expensive and inefficient. Trade relationships are much more cost-effective for everyone involved. Sarah found Supreme Commander Zephyrix waiting in her office. His 6 arms arranged in what she'd learned was a gesture of respectful greeting. Over the months of their acquaintance, she'd developed a grudging appreciation for the alien commander's directness, even if his tendency toward formal speeches could be exhausting. Sarah Chen of Earth, Zephyrix began, I bring greetings from the Imperial Council and proposals for expanded cooperation between our civilizations. Supreme Commander, Sarah replied, settling into her desk chair with the kind of casual informality that still seemed to surprise alien visitors. Good to see you again. Emma mentioned something about an integration proposal? Indeed. The Council has reviewed the preliminary results of our technical collaboration and found them impressive. Your modifications to Captain Thane's systems have applications across our entire warrior class. Additionally, your diagnostic techniques have identified efficiency improvements in our civilian technology that our own engineers had not considered.
Sarah poured herself a cup of coffee from the pot in the corner, noting that Zephyrix's environmental suit was showing the telltale signs of inefficient atmospheric processing that she'd identified in all Imperial technology.
I'm glad we could help.
Was there something specific you wanted to discuss? The Council wishes to establish permanent technical collaboration facilities on Earth, staffed by both Imperial and human engineers. We would provide advanced materials and theoretical knowledge, while your people would contribute practical application expertise and what you call troubleshooting skills. Sarah considered this proposal while studying the alien commander's body language. That sounds reasonable in principle.
What's the catch? There is no catch, as you say.
However, the Council requires assurance that human technological advancement will not eventually threaten Imperial interests. Supreme Commander, I've had this conversation with my own government about 6 times in the last 3 months, Sarah said with mild exasperation. The answer is the same every time. We're not interested in threatening anyone. We're interested in solving interesting technical problems and getting paid for our expertise. She gestured around her office, which now contained filing cabinets filled with technical documentation from a dozen different species. Look at what we've accomplished in just 3 months of collaboration. Your people have learned new approaches to system optimization that you're already applying across your empire. My people have gained access to material science and theoretical frameworks that are advancing our technology by decades.
And the military applications of this collaboration?
Sarah leaned back in her chair, meeting Zephyrix's gaze with characteristic directness. Supreme Commander, the most effective military application of our collaboration is that it makes military conflict unnecessary. Why would we want to fight each other when we can make more progress working together? Before Zephyrix could respond, the office door opened and Emma appeared with a concerned expression. Mum, you need to see this. There's something happening with the Henderson account. Sarah frowned and followed Emma to the garage, where one of her newer projects was experiencing what appeared to be a catastrophic system failure. The Henderson project was an experimental collaboration between human and alien engineers, a hybrid vehicle that combined terrestrial mechanical systems with Imperial power and propulsion technology. The prototype was currently surrounded by a team of human technicians and alien engineers, all looking baffled as holographic displays showed cascading failures throughout the hybrid systems. Sarah approached the problem with the same methodical attitude she brought to every diagnostic challenge. Talk to me, she said, addressing both human and alien team members. What were you doing when the problem started? We were testing the integration protocols between the human control systems and the Imperial power matrix, explained Dr. Martinez, the lead human engineer on the project. Everything was running smoothly until we attempted to activate the hybrid propulsion system. Kethril, the lead alien engineer, added his own analysis. The human mechanical components appear to be rejecting integration with our energy systems. This should not be possible. Our theoretical models predicted complete compatibility. Sarah studied the diagnostic displays, noting patterns that reminded her of problems she'd seen in conventional automotive systems. Have you considered the possibility that your theoretical models might be missing something? The models are based on 3,000 years of Imperial engineering experience, Kethril replied with obvious pride in his civilization's technical achievements. Right, but they're not based on human engineering experience, Sarah pointed out, pulling out her diagnostic equipment. Let me show you something. She connected her modified multimeter to the hybrid system's primary interface, immediately identifying power fluctuations that the alien diagnostic equipment had completely missed. See these irregular spikes in the power flow? Your energy systems are designed to provide steady, regulated power to components that are engineered to precise specifications. But human mechanical systems are designed to handle power irregularities. We expect fluctuations and build our systems to compensate for them. She traced the power flow through the hybrid system, identifying points where Imperial precision was conflicting with human flexibility. What you've got here is a mismatch between 2 different engineering philosophies. Your systems prioritize efficiency and predictability. Our systems prioritize adaptability and fault tolerance. And the solution? Doctor, Martinez asked. We need an interface system that can translate between the two approaches, Sarah replied, already sketching modifications on a nearby whiteboard. Something that can take your clean, regulated power and introduce just enough variability to make our systems happy, while also taking our somewhat chaotic mechanical responses and smoothing them out enough for your control systems to understand. She turned to address both human and alien engineers with the enthusiasm that always appeared when she encountered an interesting technical challenge.
This is actually a fascinating problem. We're not just integrating different technologies, we're integrating different ways of thinking about how technology should work.
Over the next several hours, Sarah led the combined engineering team through a collaborative troubleshooting process that revealed fundamental differences in how humans and aliens approached mechanical design.
The aliens optimize for theoretical perfection, while humans optimize for practical functionality under imperfect conditions. It's like the difference between a Swiss watch and a pickup truck, Sarah explained to Zephyrix, who had remained to observe the problem-solving process. Your technology is precise, efficient, and elegant. Our technology is robust, adaptable, and maintainable. Neither approach is better or worse. They're just optimized for different priorities. By the end of the day, the combined team had developed interface protocols that allowed the hybrid system to function effectively, translating between imperial precision and human adaptability in real time. The success of the collaboration demonstrated something that neither species had fully understood before. Their technological differences were actually complementary rather than incompatible. This has applications far beyond vehicle design, Kethril observed, studying the interface protocols with obvious excitement. These translation principles could be applied to any system that combines imperial and human technology. Which brings us back to your integration proposal, Sarah said, turning to Zephyrix. Supreme Commander, what we've accomplished here suggests that formal collaboration between our civilizations could benefit everyone involved. Your people get access to our problem-solving approaches and fault tolerance expertise. Our people get access to your material science and theoretical frameworks. Zephyrix's 6 arms moved in patterns that Sarah had learned indicated careful consideration. And the question of military applications? Supreme Commander, the best military application of this collaboration is making military conflict obsolete, Sarah replied. Why fight over resources when we can work together to develop better ways of using the resources we have? Why compete for territory when we can collaborate on projects that benefit everyone? She gestured towards the hybrid vehicle, which was now running smoothly with its new interface systems. Besides, having seen both imperial and human engineering approaches, I can tell you that neither of us would benefit from trying to fight the other. Your technology is too sophisticated for brute force approaches to be effective, and our technology is too adaptable for precision strikes to be decisive. We're much more dangerous as allies than as enemies. Zephyrix processed this assessment while observing the continued collaboration between human and alien engineers. Finally, he spoke with what Sarah recognized as his decision-making voice. Sarah Chen of Earth, I will recommend to the Imperial Council that we proceed with formal integration of human technical expertise into Imperial engineering programs. However, I have one final question. Sure. Do you believe that your species will be content with technical collaboration? Or will you eventually seek to expand beyond your current planetary boundaries? Sarah considered the question while watching Emma help an alien engineer understand the principles behind human electrical systems. Her daughter was asking detailed questions about Imperial material science, already showing the kind of curiosity that suggested she might follow in her mother's engineering footsteps. Supreme Commander, Sarah said finally, I think humans will probably want to expand beyond Earth eventually. But not because we want to conquer anything, because we want to fix things that are broken and build things that don't exist yet. If you've got interesting engineering problems that need solving, we're going to want to help solve them, she smiled, the expression carrying both confidence and genuine warmth. The universe is full of things that don't work quite right. Seems like a waste to fight over territory when there's so much interesting stuff that needs fixing. As the alien ships prepared to depart that evening, carrying news of successful collaboration back to the Imperial Council, Sarah stood in her garage surrounded by the evidence of humanity's first contact. Tools from 3 different worlds, diagnostic equipment that combined principles from multiple species, and technical documentation that would keep engineers busy for decades. Emma joined her, carrying 2 cups of hot chocolate and wearing the thoughtful expression that usually preceded important questions. Mum,
Do you think we'll really become partners with the aliens? Like, long-term partners? Sarah accepted the hot chocolate gratefully, considering her daughter's question while watching the Imperial ships disappear into the night sky.
I think we'll become whatever makes sense for solving the problems we encounter, honey. Maybe that's partners, maybe it's something we don't have a name for yet. She put her arm around Emma's shoulders, feeling the satisfaction that came from completing a successful repair job. But you know what I've learned over the years? When people work together to fix things that are broken, they usually end up fixing more than just the original problem. They end up fixing relationships, fixing misunderstandings, fixing assumptions about what's possible. Emma nodded, already thinking about the engineering challenges that lay ahead. So what's next? Sarah looked around her garage, now a hybrid facility that represented the beginning of interspecies technical collaboration, and smiled with the kind of anticipation that always appeared when she encountered new problems to solve. Next, we keep fixing things, she said. There's a whole galaxy out there full of complicated machines that probably need maintenance. Should keep us busy for a while.